Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special virtual kickoff of the 2025 Words and Music Festival. We're paying tribute today to Dr. Jerry W. Ward, whose vision helped shape this festival in so many countless ways, and his name is always spoken in fondness and love whenever we have this festival. I want to start off by just telling you guys a story, which is that on November 6th, Thursday of last week, I got the opportunity to go inside Angola Penitentiary for the first time and help do a poetry shop with the men who are there right now. And one man who I'll just call W carries around his poetry and he signs it and he dates it and he gives it to you as a gift when you do a workshop with him. And when he did that, I felt like it was Dr. Ward coming to say hello. Because if you knew Dr. Ward, he always had a folder of poetry that he would sign and date and give it to you as a gift. And I also really thought it was appropriate that I was getting a hello from Dr. Ward inside Angola, because when I first met him, he was teaching folks inside Orleans Parish Jail to further their literacy skills in hopes of getting their GED. And all of us who know him know of his commitment to social justice, his commitment to literature, and his steadfast belief that literature and literary events be not just for the elite, but really for the people. And it's that insistence that has guided so much of Words and Music since 2018. And also involved in that first 2018 event that One Book One New Orleans did was the curator for tonight's event, Kelly Harris-DeBerry. So I'm going to bring Kelly to the stage right now, and then I'm going to get out the way and let y'all do your thing. Have a wonderful tribute, and thank you all so much for tuning in. Bye. Oh, Kelly, you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Words and Music Festival. It has been a pleasure to be a curator for, gosh, maybe the last 4 years or so. And a lot of that time I spent with Dr. Ward. So he was an avid supporter of this festival. He and I were kind of in the start of the rebrand of Words and Music Festival. And so it's only proper, it's only right that the festival start with this tribute to Dr. Jerry Ward. We have some great panelists for this afternoon. We are waiting for Baba Kalamu. We hope that he will join us. If not, we have someone on the bench that's coming in that can help discuss that can help discuss. This is my daughter talking, but they can hear me now. Thank you. And so we are just so glad that we have this time to celebrate Dr. Ward. I'm going to read his bio. I'm going to read a short bio for those who may not know Dr. Ward and who are just scrolling online and stopping to see what we're talking about today. Dr. Jerry Ward Jr., Dr. Jerry Washington Ward Jr., born in Washington, D.C., to Jerry Sr. and Mary Ward, raised in Moss Point, Mississippi, and he would eventually become Dr. Jerry Ward, a longtime professor at Tougaloo College in Mississippi, where his career began in 1970 as a faculty member of the English department. He would later become the English chair and professor of literature. He then transitioned to another HBCU, Dillard University, in New Orleans in 2002, where he was a distinguished professor of English and pause. Can you all hear me? Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me?
We can indeed. You are good to go loud and clear.
Okay, so everybody keeps telling me they can't hear me. Okay, thank you. He then transitioned to another HBCU, Dillard University in New Orleans in 2002, where he was a distinguished professor of English and African studies until his retirement in 2012. Throughout his luminous career, and I mean just brilliant career, he taught hundreds of students both domestically and abroad and published countless poems, essays, research, and anthologies, including the essential read, Trouble the Water, 250 Years of African American Poetry, and of course, his scholarship on Richard Wright is a treasure to all of us. And I also can't forget that he co edited the Cambridge History of African American Literature. But to know him is to be challenged to the highest level of excellence, to be supported in firm and gentle ways, and to, quote, use individual courage and action to maintain individual dignity and to burn the veils of ignorance. And with that, I'm going to ask that our panelists join us. And it looks like Baba Kalamo is with us. There he is. There is everyone. One more mic check. Can y'all all hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Sorry
Yes,
for
I
all
can hear you.
that dropping the Mama, they can't hear you. We all family, huh? We know how this goes and technology. But I want to ask you all to introduce yourself. Your bios are in the comment section, so I'm not going to read all your bios, but I want to have you all introduce yourself by telling us your first time, the first time that you met Dr. Ward. Go ahead, Bob.
This is Kalamu. I met Dr. Ward at the time he was teaching at Sugarloaf College in right outside of Jackson, Mississippi. And then he went on to move and eventually ended up at Dillard University in New Orleans.
I met Dr. Ward in, let's see, about 1996. I started at Tougaloo in 95, and I didn't meet him until my second year there, really the second semester there, so 1996 when I was a student at Tougaloo College.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Candace Love Jackson. I met Dr. Ward in the spring of 1994. He had been on leave at Tougaloo College. I was a student, freshman, and I wanted to take his class because I'd been living in the shadow of Jerry Ward all my life. And so I tricked a young man into dropping his class so I could take the last slot. And that's how I met Dr. Jerry Washington Ward Jr.
I'm going to be improper and ask, how did you trick a young man into dropping the class?
I told him that I heard that Dr. Ward was really, really hard. And it was going to be a research paper, and I knew all of those things. And he was a biology major, so I was like, you really don't want those problems. And it was back in, when everything was on paper. So as soon as he dropped it, I picked it up. I was cutthroat, and I meant that.
And she's been hustling ever since.
That's right. That's right. Those of us know her know we are not surprised by that story at all.
No.
And I know you did more than just say sweet nothings to that young man.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's all I had to say. That's all I had to say. He was hard. He's really hard. Yeah.
So my name is Celie McInnes, and like Dr. Jackson, I lived in the shadow. I had a couple of Richard Wright books and the one with the foreword by Dr. Ward. So I knew of Dr. Ward's writing. But he was what made me, so I knew him probably 10 years before I physically met him. And then he was on a documentary a Richard Wright documentary. And I'll never forget, I can't tell you, you know, you grow up and you read Richard Wright and you know, hey, Richard Wright is from around here, right? You read Margaret Walker, like, hey, my mama took Margaret Walker's class. Right. In fact, on my desk, I have, this is the original copy of Margaret Walker's How I Wrote Jubilee that my mother got when she was in Margaret Walker's class. So you have these people like them all around. And I'd seen Dr. Ward on a PBS special when they were doing the Southern Writers. But it was after that documentary, I said, I'm going to send this man some of my work. And rather than him, like, you know, giving me feedback, this man emailed me back and made an appointment for his office. I'm like, hey, I wouldn't, you know, dog, I don't attend Tougaloo. I wouldn't, no. And so he called for me to come to his office. And I saw all those red marks before I saw like my work. And that began my long term. And I'll also say that in that very same meeting, he gave me 3 names of people to contact. He said, I want you to contact these 3 people, and I want you to send them your work. It was Columbia Salam, Reginald Martin, and Amos Zuboldi. So I physically was introduced to them the exact same time that I met Doc Ward for the first time physically. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you all. And talking, just listening to you all, I'm thinking about the South and his influence in the South, and particularly his influence in HBCUs, Tougaloo and Dillard University. Can you all talk about what you think his contribution was to both of those institutions and just his role as a teacher beyond yourself that you still see at those institutions today, or you see it in other people that know him or that knew him?
Well, first, this is Kalamu. First of all, I want to put Dr. Ward in the proper context, which is not a library, which is not an HBCU, but Vietnam. He's a Vietnam veteran that actually served in Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam era veteran, but I served in South Korea on a missile base with the Nike Hercules nuclear missile. And we would, Jerry and I would commiserate about our time in the armed forces. And many people don't know that about Jerry, that he served in the United States, for the United States during the Vietnam era. And Jerry Ward and I would meet once we got to the 70s, the 80s, well, the 80s and the 90s. We'd meet every week for a meal that we would have in the afternoons. So that's how I didn't know Jerry Ward as Dr. Ward. He was just Jerry as far as I was concerned.
Thank you for that.
I didn't know him as an educator. I knew he taught at those schools, but I didn't know him in that way. I knew him in other ways.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder. We used to, before COVID, we used to have lunch every month, and he would talk a lot about his time as a veteran and how disappointed he was at where the country was, and so and that he had gave his service to this country and was just very disappointed at how things were spiraling out of control. But I want to circle back to that question for you all who know him in the context of academia. Howard, for you, your thoughts about Dr. Ward and Tougaloo and just his contribution to that institution.
You know, I would say this. So last week in my class, in one of my graduate classes, the students were trying to get their projects together and they were all off. And I said, hey, I have this comment to you all. I said, this was told to my classmate, Candace Jackson. You all's theses dance like light on water, which is to say they have no focus. And before I could say the end, they all finished it. So that's a quote from Dr. Ward on Candace Jackson's paper. when we were at Tougaloo, he said, your thesis dance is like light on water. In other words, it has no focus. And I've said that so much and quoted it so much, and now the students are quoting it. So my big point is I think some of his comments on papers have gotten just been going on forever. Like, and that was on her paper. Yet
Right.
Somehow, yet somehow it's done migrated to other people's papers. So I think that was one of the things that I think just gets missed, how he had kind of mastered the art of kind of telling you how to get yourself together. And so that was it. And the other thing I'll say just really quickly is I was laughing when Celie said that he put him on, Dr. Ward put him on the Kalamu. And so Dr. Ward put me on Celie and Kalamu. He was like, here go the people you need to be reading and listening to. And so I just think putting you in connections with people was like something I think he just really was a big contribution he did for me.
Yeah, there wasn't a reading list. It was a personal contact.
Yeah, exactly.
That you went back and forth with that person. It wasn't just that you read with something that he had, Dr. Ward had written.
Yeah. You know, once in that semester that I finagled my way through into, and because I wanted to learn research, but that was fueled because as early as 5 years old, my mother told me, you're going to Tougaloo College and you're going to study English and you're going to study under Jerry Ward. So, and so by this time, he's only been there 9 years. I'm just 5 because I'm born in 74. He gets there in 70, right? So I'm living in, I understand, who is this Jerry Ward? This, what is a Jerry Ward? So when I finally get there, and then there's another UNCF Mellon Fellow. Howard and I were both Mellon Fellows with the UNCF program, and Valerie Matthews had studied under Jerry Ward, had done very well. My mother and her mother worked together at Social Security. So there was this sort of community of engagement around this lion, this wonderful Leo, right? Of Jerry Ward. And so having him, even in that first class, I still use and modified only slightly the same way he teaches he taught us a research paper, the same way I do it right now, almost 40 years later, right? But yeah, I got that comment. I always quote, he said to one of my friends who was writing her paper on Victorian literature, and she said, well, perhaps Dr. Ward, you think my paper is so bad because you're so knowledgeable about the topic. And he said, my dear, your paper would be bad to an idiot. It took me 2 years for me to convince her. He did not call you an idiot. Right. He said your paper would be bad to one, but he didn't necessarily. So it was the beautiful poetics of the quips of the, your thesis dances like light on water, nothing is focused. And that wasn't even for his class. I let him read a paper for somebody else's class. That wasn't even for his class. But it was in that sense of community building, of scholarship, that's what we all gained from that, so that when it was my turn to enter into that space as a professor, as a department chair, what was important is that my students grew individually, but also collectively, in creating a space for them to rely on each other, and in various fields. They didn't all have to be in English. Some were in sociology, some were in psychology, biology, but that they all respected each other and gleaned from each other what they needed. So that was for me Dr. Ward's legacy as an educator in a sense, but that sense of community that he built, and how to think about the world in a space, in a way that was in service to others. Yeah, so that's.
I want to insert a quote from him about teaching that he said to Cleophas Thomas in 2016. If you do not teach your students if you do not teach your students so they can teach you something, you have failed.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved teaching. Celie, were you going to say something to that question? Or
Yeah, just three quick things. The interesting thing about Dr. Wood comes to really connects with that quote. I got two things from him that should not have been connected. The first time I ever heard the term bumpkiness in a positive way was from Jerry Ward and Reginald Martin. Like, because they said, I mean, I remember the first time they was like, you know, you have a certain bumpkiness in your writing, Celie, that you should work with. Like, hey, what the saying? Like, I didn't know that bumpkiness could be cool. I didn't know that bumpkiness. Yet at the same time, on the other end is this guy who, for me, is helping to shape one of the best journals of our time. One of the journals that I wanted to be and was be published was Callaloo. Right there, for me, Callaloo is an African-American journal started by 3 African-Americans at HBCUs. So that you had this spectrum of what was blackness, on the one end, bumpkinness, and then on the other end, Callaloo, which meant that there was room for every type of black person to be loved and considered. And then the second thing that everybody said, he was the example of me that teachers teach everywhere. And that not just the people who enroll in your class are your students. I mean, I would argue that, say, myself and Charlie Braxton, who are Jackson State graduates, have been just as much Doc Ward students as all of the Tougaloo students. And that, so for me, I have to take this notion that when someone who wasn't in my class, but wanted to be a poet or wanted to be a fiction writer, I had a responsibility to read that person's paper. Right? I couldn't say, well, you're not in my class, you should go, right? Because Dr. Ward taught everywhere. And then the last point, I'm glad that Columbo brought this up. It wasn't that I was embarrassed by this, but it wasn't something that I led with. Which was, I paid for school by joining the National Guard. And, you know, if you understand the history of the National Guard and the history of the National Guard in Mississippi, matter of fact, when I joined the National Guard, my father the first word he said was, when they started letting N-words in the Guard, like that was his first, right? Yet, when I realized that, like my father and uncle, Columbo and Jerry Ward were Vietnam veterans. And that was part of our history. And that was part of our legacy. And I remember getting into this debate with this really old conservative white man. And I just whipped out. I said, hey, I have a DD-214 with honorable discharge on it. Stop talking to me. But I don't know if I would have ever been able to understand, and I'll be honest, weaponize that in a way to really kind of talk about my freedom and my place of being, had it not been for Columbo and Jerry Ward making me realize how many of the writers that I admired and how many of the culture work. Jimi Hendrix served in the military, right? So having both Columbo and Jerry Ward be very upfront with and educate me about their military service was another tool for me in this struggle fight. That's it.
Thank you. I want to throw something else in there. That Dr. Ward was also a math genius, a mathematician, and I'm curious to hear how you all think him being a math major and just a math genius informed his kind of literary criticism. Celie, you kind of talked about kind of this and that. You almost kind of made a equation and how Dr. Ward works, and so that math mind, because he's very exact about it. And so go ahead.
I will tell you this. The only reason I teach a literature and science class is because of Doc Ward. I love teaching. So I've been teaching a literature and science course in the Tougaloo College Jackson Hart Studies Summer Slam program, which is a science program for African American high school students, 9th through 11th grade. The only reason I do that is because it was Jerry Ward introducing me to Einstein. Einstein said that for a scientist to be useful to society, he must first see himself as an artist, right? I learned that through Doc Ward. And so my entire class is structured around, we begin with that statement by Einstein, and then we begin with the characteristics of the scientist and the characteristics of the artist, right? And how these two are similar and how they work collectively to push society forward. And I got that from Doc Ward in his very scientific way of reading literature. And I'll end with this, which I know is not a popular thought, but one of the reasons I don't engage social media is because the way it pushes art seems to be very anti the way Doc Ward trained us to engage art. In the social media world, people like your art if they F's with you, if you understand what I mean, right? I F's with that person. It has nothing to do with the craft and the skill. And Dr. Ward was the first person who told me, it doesn't matter if you like this person. What is the theoretical approach to the work? And if we apply a theoretical approach to the work, then we'll get the truth of the work and what it means and not be hindered by our own prejudice bias, as we know for years white scholars would do to Black artists. That's it, I'll say.
Dr. Ramsey.
You know, it was interesting because that was something I learned a little later about his math background, but it made a lot of sense to me because I felt just like a certain kind of precision he took with things. It was just very helpful for me, at least. And then I think that influenced me just trying to like really be precise in things. And it's probably no coincidence that I do so much stuff with literary data now. Like in some ways, it's kind of carrying on from that. So, but I think the main thing was just trying to be more precise with things as opposed to just throwing out ideas and opinions.
Dr. Jackson?
Well, yeah, the fact that, you know, as a math major at Tougaloo College who left high school early to come to Tougaloo to study math, that in itself demonstrates the level of genius. But you see this sort of economical approach to even his own writing, as Howard said, the preciseness. And I think that that's probably in my own work, that what I try to do. I was at a poetry reading and Seeley gave me the compliment. He said, I could tell you're a student of Jerry Ward because of the way that you're writing and the economical way that you're using the language. And so, but it really allowed him to move in these different spaces. I was a sophomore at my Mellon seminar, for my first Mellon seminar, and we're at Emory, and a couple of Black nurses come to us and like, oh, where are you from? Because I'm sure they were like, oh, Black people at Emory. Okay. So she walks over and she says, we say, oh, we're from Tougaloo. And she says, oh, do you know Jerry Ward? And I'm looking at this woman in scrubs. And she said, oh, we worked on a medical journal together. Like you, ma'am, it really put things in perspective for me about not only who I was, the person I thought I knew, I still didn't know. And just to know the brilliance of him, that on a random Tuesday at the Emory cafeteria, I'm meeting someone who worked on a medical journal with him by happenstance. You know, that, and the fact that it was a medical journal. No, not, you know, and so there were those, there are these corners that we just can't see around with Dr. Ward. And it takes all of us to kind of figure out, oh, well, over here he's really, really funny, and over here he's doing X, Y, and Z. And so we get these secrets because he's such a full human being. And that's, I think, part of that blend for me in the both sides of his brain. Like one of the few people we know that truly use both sides at the same time. Right. So.
Dr. Jackson, you mentioned the medical journal, but I want to pose a question to all of you about his scholarship, his publishing. We know Trouble the Water. We know the African American Cambridge book that he co-edited. Certainly Richard Wright. Can any of you want to tackle any of those and what that means and what we have inherited from his work on these major books in Black writing?
Well, I think, first of all, it is an amazing feat to be teaching 4 classes a semester and produce anything. Okay. So for the people who are not aware, at HBCUs, primarily, you're teaching 4 classes a semester, right? 4 classes. And the way he taught, right? So that in itself is a feat that he published anything. But the work itself for me, we wouldn't have the treasure trove of scholarship or the example of scholarship on Richard Wright, on the world, and on Black art and Black literature if we did not have a Jerry Ward. And then for him to have been in doing the work. So it's always about what are we doing and what does the work mean, and making sure that we're always doing the work. And so I hope I'm answering your question, but that there are the places. Yes, we know Richard Wright. Yes, he was, from Mississippi, but he was always bringing him to the forefront. He has never needed to be reclaimed. And because Dr. Ward was constantly finding new ways to think about things, and to think about his work, and to think about the work that needed to be done, and then not necessarily sitting in just Richard Wright. He's also reading other things and bringing it all together. So that the point of his scholarship for me is being open to exploring the critical ideas that are evolving and emerging, and engaging with them, that he was never the scholar stuck in what he was doing. He was always allowing you to open your mind and embracing. So when I asked him to be on my dissertation committee, and he told me I was being unruly because I studied Iceberg Slim and Donald Goins and the Bishop, it's the whole thing. But that he didn't try to dissuade me from that, but that he was really trying to get into the Black experience in the 1970s and some things that he hadn't thought about, and then also some connections that had been made. So that's who he is as a scholar. He's not stuck in what he was doing 40 years ago. He was constantly changing and allowing himself to evolve.
Baba, your thoughts?
When you say Baba, I assume you're talking to me.
Yes. Baba Kalamo, yes.
See, I didn't know Dr. Ward. I knew Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And he was a Vietnam era vet. I was a Vietnam era vet. Mm-hmm. So we could talk about that aspect. Mm-hmm. It didn't occur to me to think of Jerry as Dr. Ward. Mm-hmm. I mean, we called him Doc, but that was as much an honorific as a result of the work he did in Vietnam as it was for the academia. Mm-hmm. In fact, I never thought of Jerry Ward in terms of academia, even though we called him Dr. Ward or Doc. I always thought of him in terms of an oppositional fighter who wanted to bring to the forefront not only our people's contributions, but our people's potential. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was often the more important part than the contributions, the potential we had to be oppositional, and in being oppositional, to bring a different kind of consciousness forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another quote from Dr. Ward: "Can one perform Afrofuturism in an American concentration camp?"
Mm-hmm. It's funny. Mm-hmm. I often bring up the Katrina papers, but I bring it up for very selfish reasons. Mm-hmm. The Katrina papers for me, and I say this when in real time, it was the closest thing to Jean Toomer's Kane that I had read. And I say for selfish reasons because only recently, if you try to get an MFA or a PhD in creative writing, that you don't have to choose a discipline. In the past, if you were trying to get a MFA or PhD in creative writing, you had to be either a poet or either a fiction writer, right? Or a novelist. Yet all of the writers that I love, Jerry Ward, Kalami Assalam, Amir Baraka, they all wrote in multiple genres, right? I love their poetry as much as I love their plays. I love their plays as much as I love their fiction. And so I often think that if you want to know the totality of Jerry Ward, go to the Katrina Papers. Because it's not just that it contains poetry, prose, poetry essays, and narrative. It does so in such a seamless, like we remember, like when people talk about when Kane is first released, people are like, what the hell is this? Like nobody knows what to do with Kane. Like, and it's because Tuma himself is thinking, I'm trying to create a new genre. I'm trying to create a new thing to represent what we see Negro people as. We are this new thing. And so the Katrina Papers is Jerry Ward talking about who are these New Orleans going to be after this? And who are these new Southerners going to be after this? And who are these new Black people? And he was doing it, understanding tradition that he and Kalamu, and again Baraka and Alice Walker, who was both a poet and a novelist, all these brilliant Black people who understood that the genius and lives of Black people could not be contained by one genre, so we shouldn't allow other people to contain us by forcing us to work in one genre. And that was the other gift that he gave me through the Katrina Papers, was to explore all of who I am by exploring all of the genres that are available to me. That's it.
Baba Kalamu, can you talk a little bit about I don't want to say Dr. Ward because I know you know him as Jerry Ward. I mean, as Jerry, but I'm thinking about Black Art South, thinking about Tom Dent. Can you just speak to his contributions and just your relationships with the relationship Tom Dent, Black Art South, what he did in terms of theater as well, documenting a lot of New Orleans?
Well, let me deflect, as they say. What you asked me to speak about is crazy because, from my perspective, I didn't know. I knew Jerry Ward had a PhD, but I didn't know, and I knew we called him Doc as an honorific, but I didn't know he had done as much work as he had done in literature. I just didn't know it and didn't care to know it. And I knew Jerry as a fellow Vietnam era vet and as someone who could talk a good game. And so he understood a lot of the intricacies, if you will, of the literature without being a formal academician who spoke as, well, you have to understand, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And people are laughing because they know that's not the way Jerry talks.
Yes.
But he talked about those things that the well-or people talked about.
Yes.
And he talked about them in a way that reveals the reality. The Vietnam era was a hard era. Particularly, I can't speak about how it felt for Black women at that time, but for Black males, the Vietnam era was a hard era. Was a very hard era. I served on a mountaintop on Nike Hercules nuclear missile base in South Korea. And part of my MOS, my job description, included arming the nuclear warhead. So when I would talk to Jerry, and he was talking about Vietnam, and I don't know if he formally served as a medic, but he certainly fulfilled that job description as a medic in Vietnam. We talked about a lot of things that are not, to use the academic phrase, that are not germane to the discussion we are having.
Well,
But it was real.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, just to jump in real quick, what you're saying, you can hear echoes of that when you look at a lot of his Facebook posts during COVID. You can hear the kind of the history of serving in the country. You can hear that bubbling back up in a lot of his posts about COVID, especially. I encourage everyone to read his, I think it was January 7th. It was the day after they were all on the Capitol, and his response to January 6th was, now that I'm listening to you talk, it does have the tone of both soldier and writer embedded in that. Dr. Jackson, you want to say something?
Yeah, you also have to remember that Dr. Ward is sort of a social empath. So whether it was Katrina and the aftermath of that, was the one time I got a chance to shake him and go, "Don't you ever disappear again," because no one knew where he was, right? And where his scholar activism been translated into activism actively by living in New Orleans. And so by the time you go through COVID and the world is going crazy, and when you see things happening across the world, he's internalizing all of that. And so the warrior comes out, the soldier comes out, the scientist, the scholar, the poet, and the writer comes out, because what did we do it all for? Like, I think that was the ultimate question that he had. And so to watch the world dismantle itself before his very eyes is really asking the question, what did we do all of this for? What were the marches for? What were the games for, if this is what you all are going to do now? And so it also affects him physically, I think, because he's internalizing it all. And so that's when that warrior comes out. But as students, he never really talked about Vietnam much, but with the exception of the fact that in 2002, I think that was probably or 2001, whatever it was, his last full year at Tougaloo, he decided to declare war on ignorance, and he wore his army fatigues that he could still fit the class, combat boots and all, and declared war on ignorance. I'm just following that. Like, this is so, for anybody else that would be theatrics, but he literally was declaring war on ignorance that day, and it was the impact of that. But that's what his life was. He was declaring war and taking those principles, and that's how he operated. That his work really was a declaration of war against ignorance in this country and in this world. And so, yeah.
And in his introduction, I quoted him when he said, "We need to burn the veil of ignorance." So,
yes, that's what he said. He's declaring war on ignorance.
Celie, I see you want to jump in.
Yeah, so I'm going to connect Black Art South, and maybe I shouldn't, and also Free Southern Theater, right? So we're talking about Black Art South and Free Southern Theater. That was for me the blueprint of what, and I want to connect those two things along with something that you guys haven't heard in a long time, E-Drum, right? So Black Art South, Free Southern Theater, and E-Drum It's the only reason Psychedelic Literature Newsletter exists. It is the only reason Black Magnolia's Literary Journal exists. It is the only reason that Mississippi Vibe's poetry reading existed. Our poetry readings were basically a ruse. They were political events disguised as artistic events. Now, I want to be clear. We wanted to cultivate great art. But what we had learned through Blackout South and Free Southern Theater and E-Drum was the Du Boisian notion that all art is propaganda. And then you have the notion that all art is propaganda, and we're using as our foundation the Columbia Salam poem "Cosmic Deputy" is one branch, and then the other branch is "Don't Be 14" in Mississippi. So you got "Cosmic Deputy" and "Don't Be 14." Jerry Ward's "Don't Be 14" in Mississippi. That is driving all of the public artistry work that we are doing. Because what I was doing was we're going to have these poetry readings, and then I'm going to then seduce, trick young writers to come to these workshop classes. And so what we are doing then is trying to create artistic activists. So we were living out that blueprint. And so what at our height, we have gotten to where if you wanted to run for office in Jackson, Mississippi, you had to come to highlights on Saturday night and make a speech. Simultaneously, if you had a play happening and you needed some funding over here, you had to come over to highlights to make your call. That all comes from Black Arts, Blackout South, and Free Southern Theater of understanding. See, and the last thing I'll say is that what Doc Ward and Columbia, and I have to say another name, Nao Barbara Malcolm Watkins, right, who was the wife of Hollis Watkins, right? What they taught me was not to believe the lie that politics ain't got nothing to do with art. In fact, what I learned and what I would teach people is that the only people who say they don't like politics and art, what they mean is they don't like your politics in their art. And so through that, we understood that art has always been activist work, and we wanted to make sure that we pass that on to our community and our generation through that. That's it.
Howard, did you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I was just fascinated, and this just kind of following up on what Celia is saying, and I started thinking about just that blend of people in multiple identities. I think that's something that's undercurrent here anyway. Like us knowing Dr. Ward is like a teacher, as a Vietnam vet, as a poet, essayist. So I think, yeah, that to me, that's really saying something, that one could occupy these identities, but then, as Celia was saying, they make you choose in certain spaces, and then those choices, yeah, it's weird. I just was really honing in on that point. Like, you're right, in creative writing programs, they would make people choose, but a lot of the people we were most drawn to were writing across genres. And, you know, with Dr. Wood, it wasn't just the poems, it was the poems, it was essays, it was it. But really, those goddamn emails.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was it. All these goddamn emails. And that was as much education as anything.
I'm glad you brought that up, because he jumped right into technology, you know, in terms of social media and everything. And he used it and leveraged it to kind of go to war on ignorance again, as Dr. Jackson, you were saying. And so, you know, all of those emails, like, I never deleted anything he or Kalama sent, because I know there's some gems in there. I know I'm gonna have to go back to it. You know, there's going to be a reference of something. If you look at his Facebook timeline, there are countless recommended books, like recommended book lists to read. There's just so much there, not just in the publishing or in the social media publishing ecosystem that you can pull from. Like, you know, there's the books on the shelf, but then he's just dropping things right in your lap, you know, inside of all the kind of crazy things. Everything that you said, Celia, about why you're not on social media. Well, Dr. Ward was like interrupting that and like just jumping into it and just being a disruptor of kind of the ignorance that he went to war at. I'm curious to hear, and I was going to say something else, Howard, about, you talk about all the identities. We talked about math. He was in a fraternity, and someone is telling me, make sure you shout out that he was an alpha man. So all of these different things, he had all of these different pockets in his life. What do you all think in terms of, let's say someone didn't know Dr. Ward? Like, what would be your, how would you bring them in? What would be the on-ramp to Dr. Ward if for those younger folks that are in college or people that are watching, for the next generation, what's the on-ramp to Dr. Ward?
I'm gonna go a different way because I know everybody's gonna go. So I want to go a different way. If I was making a movie about Dr. Ward's life, the first scene you will see in that movie is him doing the electric slide. Dr. Ward
love today
probably did the best electric slide of anybody I've ever seen in my life. And the reason that's important is because being human was always the focus of not only Dr. Ward's life, but of all the Black writers that I love, Kwame Assalam, Margaret Walker Alexander, Reginald Martin. Like, your people whose writings are plastic, probably because they're plastic human beings. And what you never lost sight of with Dr. Ward was that who he was as a scholar, who he was as a creator, was rooted into who he was as a human being. Some of the best baked chicken and rice I ever had.
Well, you from Mississippi, you don't have much anyway.
Well, When it
comes to food, now wait, hold on now. Let me back up. When it comes to food and preparing food in various ways, Mississippi ain't got nothing but deep fried and boiled.
I'm gonna let you live on that because
that's true.
Because I just finished some wonderful butter beans and field peas that my wife had downstairs. So I'm clear that all the
I bet you can't cook them.
That all the blues that ever come out came from the butter beans of Mississippi. So I'm clear on what we got here in Mississippi.
We have a comment in the chat box that says shots are fired. Shots are fired.
But that's all to the point, right? That the love of laughter, the love of camaraderie. This is what you had to be a real writer.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say is know Jerry Ward the human being, and then Jerry Ward the writer will be even more meaning for you. That's what I would say.
One of the pictures, and I'm one of the pictures I have. My favorite picture of Jerry Ward is that he's got great knees because he liked to drop it. So it was in natchez, and I'm like, Dr. Ward, at that time I think I was in my 30s or 40s, and he on the ground, he just bending and he just having a good time, and I'm just like, your knees, sir. I don't. But he loved a good time. He loved a good wine.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He loved a good Chivas Regal. He loved his scotch. And that's I think. But when Howard talked about the emails, I was in graduate school and he had read James Coleman's latest work. It was a book on, I think, John Edgar Wideman. Rest in peace to James Coleman, my professor from UNC Chapel Hill. And I saw him, it was during the George Moses Horton Conference for the Study of African American Poetry. And I saw him like this. And I recognized the envelope from across the aisle. And he said, "How did you survive?" Because even as a colleague, he had printed out 2 pages, single space, 10-point font. his analysis, his recommendations, his all of that, and he's just sitting there going like, how am I supposed to do all this that Jerry Ward has done? But if you didn't, you were special if you received an email of that he took that kind of time. And I will forever hold. I just pulled up mine, and I'm looking at it. And I wish you all could see how long this is a review of my second novel, and what it felt like for him to go, all right, I kind of like this one, right? The first one, I write romance suspense. So the first one was a little bit more brown sugar, and he wanted what was the movie that was out at the time? He wanted more Thomasina and Bushrod. It was a play on that one, but it was the updated version. Much more political. This one's a little bit more political, so that it gave it the gravitas that he wanted. But just to know that he read it, that he would give me the feedback, right? Whether he liked it or not. Some he didn't like, some he didn't. And if I had to tell somebody about Jerry Ward, I would say, because I've sort of patterned myself after that, after him. I would rather be disciplined by somebody who loved me than somebody who didn't.
Right, exactly.
And that's what I think. If you were a student or a colleague or a random, or a regular person working with him in various ways, you got to be able to accept that the discipline, and sometimes even the harsh word, is still given in love. So you got to be strong enough and want whatever it is that you're trying to get to bad enough to be able to take that in, accept it, be gracious, because he's going to give it to you anyway. Just because you put it before.
Well, I would say that I would just add as a footnote that many of your academic peers have never seen Thomasina and Bushrod.
What that's true. What is the name? And I'm a film person. What is the name of the movie? Howard Seeley. Okay, I'm gonna look it up. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And you're right, Baba. You're absolutely right.
And the thing about Thomasina and Bushrod, Thomasina preceded Bushrod, and she could shoot just as well as Bushrod.
There you go. Well, he wanted more of that. I gave him that in the second one, but I didn't give him that in the first one. I didn't give him that in the first one. I'm gonna look it up so I make sure I have it.
For you all who are watching online, and I'm seeing some comments. If you don't have this book, you should be on your shelf. It's Dr. Ward's words and a collection of interviews and things he's written and said. And so you should definitely check this book out. Howard, say it again.
It was Queen and Slim. That's what I called
That's right, Queen and Slim.
Yeah, that's what he wanted. That's what he wanted in the first one, but he got more brown sugar than he got Queen.
There we go. Yeah. Queen and Slim. There we go.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll say this though, since we were talking about Dr. Ward's publications and the writings. I mean, this might be on the less than, but I feel like we almost gotta say, because Dr. Ward would make certain kind of, he loved HBCUs.
Yes.
But he also critiqued just the idea of just how much work he had to do. And I feel conflicted on saying that, because I feel like if he had followed the advice that he gave me sometimes, or if he had taught, then he wouldn't have had as much time as he had for me. So I just want to acknowledge that. But on the other hand, I wish part of honoring his legacy would be for HBCUs to find ways to value their literature faculty a little bit more. And I think that was because he would be teaching all of these classes. Then Celia is talking about, he had time for me and I wasn't in his class, and then he was doing this and doing that. But I always feel like the schools themselves, somehow administration could have done a little bit more, just overall, not just with Dr. Ward, but just in general, just all of the work people have put in. I sometimes feel like we haven't done enough. And now I know it's some larger issues way above me that can claim some of that, but God, if I think about some of the stuff with Dr. Ward, that's something I wish we had done better, or people have been able, or I think that's something that's not too late for us to get to. And so
But you gotta put that in context though.
Mm-hmm.
He was an oppositional person, and he was opposed to the status quo of that era in particular. And for many of us, he represented the outsider, like Braden Applebaum, Richard Wright, but he represented the outsider.
Yeah. But
he was clear about that. He was clear, to use Stokely, he was clear, 100% clear.
But I do, Howard, I think you're absolutely correct. And I know at some point I followed in the same pattern, working at HBCUs, that you give, particularly early in my career at Tougaloo, because I was a Jerry's kid. You know, there were so few, it was a small club, and I felt that I had a responsibility to the students that I was teaching coming behind me, to give them everything that I had. And I sort of sacrificed a lot of things in terms of my scholarship, but I was able to do some things. But that was also he gave us everything that he had at the time. I tried to elevate and go and give them everything that I had. But you're absolutely right. I think we should do better by faculty in general, but particularly in those in the humanistic disciplines, in the humanities, in the social sciences, where it's such a nurturing kind of environment, that we really do need to do better by those who are like Dr. Ward, who need time. You need the cognitive rest to think and process and all of those things. And if you don't have that, so that when I got to SIUE and I'm teaching, 3 classes with you, it's like, wait, I don't know what to do now. I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but it was very foreign, because they weren't just sitting outside the door. I wasn't making hair appointments. I wasn't making doctor's appointments. I wasn't combing hair. I wasn't reading. I wasn't writing. It was a lot, and I kind of hustled Howard into teaching. What was that? How many classes did we teach in 2 years that I was?
Oh yeah, no, we expanded. I talk about it all the time. Just like we were doing a lot, and more than the school had ever done.
Right, but that was
at HBCU. Yeah.
To kind of connect that, I would say that. So those 4 mentors, like Dr. Ward, Kalamu, Reginald Martin, and Amazu Bowden, they were really intentional. And bringing it back to Dr. Ward, they were really intentional. They weren't trying to make their students carbon copies of them.
Right.
Like Dr. Ward, like you look at the 3 people on this screen that he mentored. All of us have a piece of Dr. Ward. 4 people, I'm sorry, 4 people on this screen that he mentored. All of us have a piece of Dr. Ward. Yeah. But he loved and saw us individually enough to let us do what was best for us. And so I think that was a part of, because the question I never got to ask him, which is probably going to be unfair, because I do want the other 4 of you on the screen, maybe not to answer it for him, but to answer. Dr. Ward, Kalamu, and Hollis Watkins, 3 men who for me are as political as they are artistic, are some of the rare people who didn't become bitter as they got older. And I know a lot of older people who became bitter. And I always wondered, how did these 3 escape bitterness? How did these 3 not get consumed in bitterness in a way? And then so now I look at the other people, right? I look at Sister Harris-DeBerry, I look at Doc Ramsey, I look at Doc Jackson, I look at myself, and how we all 3 navigate. For me, the way becoming not bitter is I just retired early. I ain't even lie to you. I gave 25 years. I'm good. I was like, all right, well, oh, look at the time. Has it been 25 years?
And he reminds us of that every.
Yes, I do. When I go on Jackson State campus, like, hey, how y'all teachers that still working? But for me, that was the easiest way, you know. I mean, so I hope that thinking about that, Dr. Ward for me was able to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And I know so many people who were in the civil rights movement and who were in the Black Power movement that later in life became bitter. And he never became bitter. Kalamu never became bitter. Reginald Martin never became bitter. And I think that is as much of a gift that they gave to us. And I just wanted to add that as something I strive to do as I now, you know, once you get past 50, right? How do I make my life meaningful in the same way that they made their lives meaningful and continuing forward? That's it.
I wanted to. Kalamu, I'm gonna just say real quick that Kalamu would say, C. Lee, that Dr. Ward didn't remain bitter because he moved to New Orleans, got that food instead of Mississippi food.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, there you go.
I didn't have to say it. I didn't have to say that.
I don't think you became bitter because once you're on a college campus, there's always hope. And you see new writers.
There's always hope wherever Black people are.
Yes, definitely. And I think
don't say the college campus.
Well,
that's one of the most hopeless places there is.
Well, at least hope in it with students and new voices and new things, you know, thinking and new ideas and all of that. But he would. It's the same thing I said earlier about him being a social empath. He didn't get bitter. He just became sad. And as long as he could, you know, when the fight is still going and things are looking up and you've got, you know, looking relatively, y'all, I'm just saying relatively, still a work in progress, but you still believe. It's that when he, you know, that he didn't have time for bitterness.
Right.
But the sadness will creep in. The hurt will creep in, but not bitterness.
I was going to say in this book, I know Celie, you said that Celie, you said that we couldn't really speak for him. I think he speaks for himself in this book when he talks about his choice, his deliberate choice to stay in HBCUs, that he considered it a sacrifice. He considered it an investment in generations to come to stay there. He could have gone anywhere. And he, you know, we didn't even mention China, his work in China, you know, I mean, there's so much to cover, not only his students, you know, domestically, but internationally. I mean, there's so many different combinations of panels we could actually have about Dr. Ward, that this is just kind of the tipping point. I'm going to open it up for questions, but before I end, I wanted to kind of share one of my favorite Dr. Ward stories. And you know, we talk about his college students, but he loved children. He loved kids. And when my daughter was going to the 4th grade, this was like right at COVID, and he was concerned about her losing ground in school and all of those things. He assigned her, he said, I want to take over her summer learning. And we said, sure, you know, not knowing that he was going to assign her W.B. Du Bois, The Soul of Black Folks. I was like, Dr. Ward, I mean, she's going to the 4th grade. And he said, what does age have to do with intelligence? What does age have to do with intelligence? And so she wrote her first essay. He assigned her an essay, 5-paragraph essay, and demanded it just like a college student. You know, when am I going to get my essay, and you know what it required, his requirements. And he would also assign her vocabulary words, vocabulary lists. He would send these words that sometimes we didn't even know what the word was on the list, right? And later on, she was in class using one of those words, and the teacher asked her, how do you know that word? And she said, I just know it, you know. And they didn't believe that she knew the word. And, you know, she was basically, I have other teachers besides you. And Dr. was her teachers. And so
I love it.
He has spanned generations. And so we're all grateful for everything that he has given so many people, both in Mississippi, New Orleans, and beyond. So we have a few questions in the chat. Let me see. Marion Moore, a NOMO member, says, I can't say that I interfaced with Dr. Ward. I remember seeing Kalamo and Dr. Ward when I went out for lunch downtown. I had much the same reaction as going to Snug Harbor for dinner and finding that I was seated close to Ellis and Jason Marsalis. Sometimes we find ourselves in the aura of giants and we eavesdrop shamelessly. And that's from Mary. That's a comment, not necessarily a question. Megan, can you pull the other? Was there another question? I met Dr. Ward. This is Harris-DeBerry. I met Dr. Ward as a junior in high school when he read at my school my senior year while interviewing him for my creative writing class on camera. This is actually on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. I asked him, is it important for young people to read good literature? And he responded, Jarvis, define good literature. He smiled as I scorned, but it was the response I needed. And after stumbling through an answer, he gave me a brilliant lecture about the limits and some of the benefits of a canon. Anyone else? There are others.
I also want to say that if you see Dr. Ward in the front row of your panel discussion at any conference, and he looks like he's asleep, he was, but he was, but he could hear in his sleep.
Yep.
So when he woke up after you finished, he'd ask you the hardest question ever.
Yep.
Because he could hear in his sleep. He was
right.
They just want to throw that out there. You gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Any Megan, are there any other declaring war on ignorant? Love it. That is poet Valentine Pierce from New Orleans. The poets are in the building. Jarvis says Dr. Ward has a whole Facebook response to Erykah Badu's music video Window Seat, responding to the similarities or she's using the metaphor of JFK assassination, and that he did not like it, and that it kind of pushed the boundaries of First Amendment. So you knew what he thought, you knew how he felt. You never had to guess with him. And we're so appreciative of that. So many people confront, but that was not him. I want to ask everybody for a final remark, and then we will hand it back over to Megan.
So I told the story once when we had a impromptu. I was a reading myself, and Dr. Kim McMillan, who has done a couple of the Black Fire This Time anthologies, right? And so we were doing a reading, and we had it was a kind of an impromptu Doc Ward tribute at the time when we first got the word of his passing. And so I've only told this story once. So Sadiq Ali, the brilliant poet and photographer, and also very close friend. So I love Sadiq Ali. We've just been friends now since around 96. And we were both up for the Tom Dent Award, right? So we were both nominated. We were finalists for the Tom Dent Award. And so he won, right? And at the time I didn't think much about it. I was like, yeah, you're a great poet. But then I got a call and they said, hey, Sadiq Ali has won the award. Would you come and give a presentation and give a lecture on Sadiq Ali? And I was like, so you want me to come and publicly tell why he better than me? Like, that's my young mind. You have to understand, I'm young and man. So I like that. Can you that's like you at the Oscars, and they get an award to somebody else, but they want you to come on stage and say why. Like, I was like, and so my response was like, yeah, I'll get back to you. And y'all know when people say I get back to you, that means we ain't gonna get back to you. So about a day or so later, I'm talking to Doc Ward. And I said, Doc, can you believe that they asked me to come do this, that, and the other. And Dr. Ward, I didn't know this at the time, Doc Jackson and Doc Ramsey, that when Dr. Ward is sitting very quiet and pensively, like listening to you, like that is not what you want. You really, I'm this back, you know, saying, yeah, that's the look. And I'm going back and forth. He said, well, see, can I? He said, can I ask you a couple of questions? I'm like, yeah. He said, is Saidi a well-crafted poet? Like, yeah, of course he is. Is he deserving of an award? Of course he is. Why you can't go say that? Like, why can't you? And so I went back, my ego, my male 27-year-old ego, well, such. And finally, Dr. Ward, he stopped me. He said, Lee, go give the presentation for this one reason. I said, what's that? Literary careers are like God. They work in mysterious ways. I was like, what kind of sensei grasshopper? But it's Doc Ward. So you just, I'm like, all right, okay, yeah, I sensei. Okay, fine. So I go, and I want y'all to know, I wrote one hell of an analysis of Saidi's poetry. I mean, it was, look here, as they say about cooking, I put my foot in. Like I brought the funk down on this analysis. And so I give the presentation, right? And this is what Saidi and I laugh about this. The award for the Tom Denner Award is a certificate. You get a certificate. Well, after my presentation, I actually was given, I said 3, actually, it was 4 paid presentations. 4 people wanted to pay me to come give a presentation. So to this day, I tell you, Saidi, you got a piece of paper. I got 4 checks from your award. But I would have never gotten that opportunity.
Right.
And what I think about is, here was the advice that Dr. Ward was giving me that it took me into my 40s. It took me even 20 years after that to realize that. He was saying, go be a good human being, man.
That's right.
Like, that's all the advice. It wasn't literary. What he's like, dude, go be a good human being. And so at the core of Doc Ward's writing, he's pleading with us, whether it's a poem, whether it's an essay, he's pleading with us, go and be a good human being. That's it. Mm-hmm. But I'm still happy I got them checks. So
I think mine would just be, I remember towards the end of my time to college, you know, I was realizing like, man, I might not have time to talk to Dr. Ward as much like this. So I was at his office constantly asking, raising all kind of questions. And one time he said to me, and it stuck with me, he said, you know, everybody's always searching for the answer. And then he said, and he paused, he waited. He's like, there is no damn the answer. There are answers. And that just was like, I was like, okay. So that always stuck with me, just having all these multiple answers. And it was they being these multiple people, all helpful.
I will also add that it's okay. So Dr. Ward, and I would say Kalamu, and I would say everybody else on this panel too, I've been amazed in the way that they were able to stay current and to stay relevant and plugged into changing culture in a way that I just was not able to. And so I admire them. Like I was a blues kid. I saw B.B. King live at the age of 6. And from the age of 6 to 16, I saw B.B. King every summer my entire life, right? So I saw B.B. King at the age of 6. At the age of 10, I saw Prince open for Rick James. I know I wasn't supposed to see Prince open for Rick James at the age of 10, but damn it happened. Let's move on. We can talk about this story later. But I did. And so for me, when music changed, right, when it went from, you know, musicians playing to sampling, I just didn't understand how to deal with it. Like it didn't make sense to me. Everybody else it did. Everybody else just kind of, you know, rolled with it. And so I was always amazed at Doc Ward and Kalamu and all of those mentors of mine, that for them, whatever Black people did, they were always able to put Black people before what Black people did, if that makes sense. Where for a lot of us, and particularly if you are of a certain time and a certain age, the what Black people do somehow becomes more important than the Black people themselves, and that's how you get out of touch. And so if I say that's a lesson that I'm still learning and still trying to grow in from Dr. Ward, is focusing on the Black people as opposed to how they do what it is that they do. That's it.
We have 10 minutes, and I'm going to give it to our last two panelists, Baba Kalamu, and Dr. Jackson.
I defer to Dr. Jackson.
Between Celie and Howard, so my final thoughts. I hope that at the end of my career, and when I'm no longer here, that I would have amassed a body of work like Dr. Ward, or that at least have the respect of my colleagues and my former students like that. Well, one thing I take with me, like Celie said, you got to have to separate my love for Black people and what they do. But I want to. I interviewed him in January, right before he passed, and couldn't get him to take any credit for the work that he'd done, because he'd always just done the work. And he would not say that he was a rebel. He would not say he was, he was just doing the work. And I think what I took from that is that you just have to keep doing the work, and doing the work in love, and to be a good human being, as Celie said, because that's exactly who he was. He was a good human being, and he taught us to be good human beings. Now, and we hope at the end of the day that the world will get more good human beings than bad ones. But it's been a blessing to be a Jerry's kid. It truly has been a blessing. There aren't that many of us, but there are enough of us to really make the impact. Because to call yourself a Jerry's kid, I did that once at a conference, and people thought, oh, Jerry Ward has a daughter. And I was like, it's just me. It's just me. But they didn't understand what that meant. And we told him once, for some of us, you're the only father that some of us really know. Because he was feeding a piece of what we needed academically and intellectually, that and that's, for some of them, my father was a scientist, so he didn't really understand, oh, you're going to present at a conference. He was like, what they paying? I was like, no, they're not paying anything. We're doing this because it's cultural. It's for the people. He was like, people don't pay Kroger. Kroger doesn't take the people. And but Dr. Ward gave us license and gave us the ability to be free intellectually. And I think that we should all strive for that. And I miss him terribly.
We all do. We all do, certainly. Baba Kalamu, you still deferring or no?
Jerry Ward was a friend of mine. That's all I got to say.
And with that, I'm going to end with a quote from him, 2021, April 14th, 2021. He says simply, we are pinpoints in forever.
I say.
Yeah, and we're glad that we crossed paths on those pinpoints with him. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us today in remembering, honoring the brilliance of Dr. Jerry Ward. The Words and Music Festival starts Wednesday, I believe, and you can go to the website, Words and Music NOLA, and see the full schedule of all the great events that are happening, all the great literary events that are coming up this week. So support Words and Music however you can. And with that, we thank you, Megan, and I'm turning it back over to her. Thank you all so much for being patient with me in the beginning and all the interruptions. And thank you all for watching. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you all so much. I was over here. I'm so glad I'm behind the scenes because I was choked up half the time y'all were talking. Candace, especially when you said he didn't take credit for the work he did. I got the chance to interview him. I asked him, would you please come do the keynote for the GED graduation? And of course he agreed. And I said, I have to introduce you. Please send me a bio so I can introduce you properly. And he said, oh, no, don't introduce me and read my bio. People can Google me. Just tell them I'm a man who lives in New Orleans.
That's it.
And yeah, that was Dr. Ward in a nutshell, a man who lived in New Orleans.
That's it.
So I hope we can all live up to that man who lived in New Orleans in some small way. Thank you all so much for being here, for kicking off Words and Music virtually. As Kelly said, go to wordsandmusic.org and find out all about the in-person programming happening November 19th through 22nd. We're kicking off at the Andre Caillou Center for Performing Arts and Cultural Justice on November 19th with Reading for Justice, From Incarceration to Exoneration. Thank you so much, and I will see you hopefully on Thursday.
Thank you.